Hey, good morning. It is August 24th of 2026. Welcome to the Dev Talk Show. I'm Chris Gomez on a relatively cool summer morning here in the Northeast. And right over here, I think my finger
Nice.
went off screen, but I think, and then it's pointing kind of backwards. Funny. This is so hard to get used to, even after several years, is my co-host, Rich Ross. How are you doing this morning, Rich?
Doing well, doing well. Fresh off a week away, and I think probably for the first time ever, I completely unplugged. I took Outlook and Teams off of my phone and did not log into anything. I did a lot of actually cleanup was not that bad when I got back on yesterday. But yeah, I'm feeling ready to get back to work here. This is awesome. So good to start the week off with the show here with you as well. So yeah,
Yeah,
looks good.
summer's been a little busy. I did spend a week, not this past week, but recently. I don't know if we did a show right after that though. I don't remember. Um, where I was
Yeah.
I don't want to say involuntarily unplugged, but when I got to where we were, I realized like, oh, there's no signal here. So I guess because sometimes you
That
go
makes it
out,
easy.
yeah, sometimes you go out and maybe you're camping or hiking and there's plenty of signal. Like in
Hmm.
fact, it might even be better than home, but not in this case. So,
Yeah,
all right.
definitely.
Well,
So I guess I mean since it's been away, what have you been up to? What's been going on? What have you been kind of digging into? I've been when even though I was away and not doing work stuff, I was looking at some fun things, and we can certainly talk about those. Some game stuff. So that was kind of fun.
yeah, there's probably two major things that I've been concentrating on. One, I would like to bring to the show as we head towards November, and
Hmm.
that's .NET 11. Um,
Yes.
.NET 11 Preview 7 came out recently. I don't remember exactly when, although if I look it up, it looks like that answer is August 11th, or at least that's when the blog post is from the .NET team is dated August 11th. So .NET 11, there's probably a lot more features than this, but I will tell you where I've started is actually C Sharp 15. And
Okay.
and C Sharp 15 has a feature that I can't wait to dig. It probably deserves its own episode, and I just want to know what people think about it. Is union types are coming to the language, which if you have spent any time in a language like F sharp, then it's it's one way. Well, I shouldn't say one way. One um, one thing that it is similar to, and I'm going to just say that so that we don't get into language arguments with people, although it doesn't really matter, is like discriminated unions in F sharp and other languages.
Hmm.
And that's been a feature of F sharp that's had my attention for years and years and years. When I think about all the reasons that I kind of liked looking at F sharp, that was one of them. And C sharp doesn't have the concept. And in fact, it led me, boy, if I could find the video, that would be something else. It led me one day to a conversation that Mads Torgensen was having about this. And he really laid it out in a way that I'd never heard before, never so simply explained before about what this means for a language when you do things the C sharp way and when you do things the F sharp way, and what it means for your code being like open or closed, so to speak. Like, um, so maybe it deserves its own episode, or we could see about installing, because I just looked at my machine. My Preview 7 SDK is not installed. So
Okay.
that could be really quick to show how, in my opinion, and of course, it is live, so you never know what will happen. But in
Right.
my opinion, how it is easier than ever to keep up with installing the .NET SDK. I just feel like it gets a little bit easier each time, and so much has changed in the last few years. But so besides that, it's been looking at what's been going on with Foundry and Agent Framework, and I think
Mhm.
that the PizzaBot demo we did last year, if
Yeah.
we're to do it again, there are some new features that might be really interesting to look at and use, that just weren't around. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's some cool, and maybe this is where you're going to. There's some preview features when it comes to Foundry related to skills.
Yes.
And we've been talking about skills, on some of the apps that we've been building. When we think about the producer app, which I also downloaded a fresh copy of, so I've rebuilt 3 machines over the course of the vacation too. So that's one way to get disconnected, is completely rebuild your machine and not be able to get access to stuff. So, but I have a machine that's set up here specifically for my Azure development stuff, and kind of brought down the producer as possibly something that we look at, but then look at Foundry, because it is based on skills, and skills, you can run them locally. But when you think about running skills locally, you're basically inside of some kind of an interface, whether that's a chat interface or a Copilot CLI, or even the new Copilot app, which, all of them have very similar chat kind of features. And you're kind of bringing that skill, or calling that skill, or invoking that skill as part of what you want that, what essentially is that CLI, right? Or that agent, sorry, what's essentially that agent, whether it's in the CLI or the chat, to do. So if that agent is there, then is there a way to get a skill inside of an agent? And there is, and that is something that's possible through Agent Framework, and possible through our old friend that we haven't talked about in a while, but we did. I think we first did a conversation about a couple of years ago, the Azure Developer CLI, and having that be a way of essentially integrating and creating agents that go into Foundry. So that's a cool couple of topics and things that we can certainly look at as well. I know was playing with it before I went away as part of a demo for a customer, and it is pretty cool because that still gets created, and what's now what I do with it. So this kind of lands in a good spot for it. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think we talked a little bit about what to me seemed like the subtle differences between instructions, skills, because the agent harnesses, boy, I hope I'm using that term right. Like when you sit there with GitHub Copilot CLI, or maybe you're using, it doesn't matter what harness you're using. It could be something inside VS Code, your favorite editor. Yeah. That the maturity to use skills has really improved, where at first you would just like load up this instructions file. And so I remember thinking back to the PizzaBot, if we wanted to try and narrow in how the PizzaBot worked, we would keep on adding to the instructions file.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting is I'm not 100% sure if some of the things that are in that instructions file should be broken out into a skill. It's more about it's more about whether, like, is that truly reusable? And I don't even know if it's important that it's reusable across agents, although that's probably the very best time to create a skill. But at least if it's something that's reusable and doesn't have to be part of the context of every call, then maybe, then maybe that's when it's a skill. Because I don't know if this is a good idea, but you remember for the PizzaBot, there was the function tool call for calculating how much pizza. Now, that required an ability. It was an interesting little dance of when the agent that is actually running, when the agent decides I need a function tool call, it's really the LLM responding, and in its response is not just giving you the text of what its response is, what we all see when we chat with agents. It was also responding saying like, oh, hey, I want you to call your function tool. And so we had code that would intercept that, call the function tool, and then put the response from our own function tool back in there. Agent Framework and other type SDKs would streamline that out for you. But I kind of intentionally wanted to see what was really going on there, because I think it's important to know, like, this is what your agent's really doing. And it creates this interesting dance of like, okay, make the call to the LLM. That LLM's in the cloud because you happen to be using Foundry in this case. The answer comes back to you. You have to I don't know if intercept's the right word, but you have to respond to it with local code now, and then that goes back, and then you get the real answer that you're ready to give to whoever's using your app. And in our case, that might have been sent back out to voice live APIs and the text to avatar APIs, so that that our avatar could answer. A little bit of back and forth there, yeah.
But it's good to kind of walk through and understand that, because sometimes the perception is that when I make that prompt that goes up there that has, potentially the ability to call a function in there, that it's the LLM that calls the function. It's the model that calls the function. Model doesn't do anything with that.
Yep.
Model is just basically putting words after words after words and saying, based on what you gave me, this is probably the next best thing that you should be doing. And at that point, it comes back to code.
Yep.
Because we're calling code, and we could look at that and say, well, no, that's not really what we want to do, or do something that completely overrides it. So there's always that flow that happens, and it isn't the LLM going off and doing these things. It comes back into something that we still control when it comes to the code and that aspect of it.
Yeah. Especially it would be very easy to get a false impression that your code is somehow calling Foundry and it's doing everything.
Yeah.
And that's not really the case. Like Foundry, and I want to be very careful. I don't know that I want to use the word hub, because hubs have a meaning in Foundry, but it is a central place to store and declare and sort of standardize on agent definitions, knowledge, in this case, now the preview for agent skills, and even the tools that are available to an agent, such as an MCP server. It was interesting to discover that in some respects it's all kind of a declarative, I don't want to call it a registry, I don't know that that's right, but once you get your agent all set up, we could actually get JSON that was, well, this is essentially the agent in some way, and we could take this JSON and we could probably create a new agent in Foundry programmatically by going, here you go, here's the declarative nature of that agent.
Yeah. And that, because you're doing it that way, the registry's not far off from a term, right? You're registering it inside of your project, inside of Microsoft Foundry. And then in there, you can do other things with that. So there's actually an ability to create a workflow inside of Microsoft Foundry where you can go ahead and say, well, I've got these 4 agents that are up there, and I kind of want to have this one do something and then go call this other one. And then maybe this other one gets triggered by something else, but I essentially have a way of orchestrating the interactions across all of those agents. So in some essence, it is almost registering it for your project to be able to be reused in whatever makes sense for what you're trying to solve.
I wondered if my dog stayed in the room. That's all. Sorry.
That's okay.
He got awfully quiet. Yeah, he got awfully quiet, and I didn't see him on the screen, so I thought, did he stay? Did he leave?
Is he?
Yeah, he's right behind me.
Oh, okay. He's really behind you.
Yeah, he's like literally behind this chair, so that's why you can't see him.
He's got your back.
Yeah. So I think another topic that we're interested in looking at soon is, because you mentioned it to me, and I've been wanting to get back to it for a while, and I think there were a few commenters who did as well, was when we were working with Monogame.
Okay.
And there's a couple things that I would like to do there. Specifically, one of them is I think maybe another sort of, I don't want to call it like a tutorial, but a soup to nuts type day with a different game than the Circus Atari clone. But even when it comes back to that game,
right?
So people may remember that particular game was born out of a presentation that I think I gave first in 2011 or so.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and so I haven't really worked on that code in a very long time. And as I've been building that again, I did it once for this show, and then I sort of started going halfway down through it for the on.net live show that I did with those folks. That was a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. Is I realized, like, wow, this is messy. it was so broken down to be simple to follow live that it turns out if you try to look, in my opinion, if you try to look at it later on GitHub, you go, boy, well, the code's kind of a mess. And it's like, okay, that makes sense. So there's certain concepts that I'd love to bring to it, such as these concepts, I don't want to say they're not built into Monogame, because they're not. It's just that Monogame leaves it to you as the programmer to decide if you want to have your if you want to have like games, if you want your game to operate like a state machine.
Right.
What state am I in right now? Am I in the main menu state? Am I in the game state? And then game states can be broken down where perhaps like if you ever went to an old arcade machine and you noticed like it was Pac-Man, and if you stood there and watched long enough, you would watch Pac-Man rotate through a few things.
Yeah.
It would show this demo of gameplay. Well, that's a game state in itself. You're in the demo gameplay state, and code is running. You're not checking input. Well, you kind of are, because you're trying to decide, do I need to get out of this state because somebody put in a quarter, somebody touched a button, and I want to switch to a mode that's more of like, let's play. But you're in a game state in and of itself. And then, you might remember that demo would end and you would then shift to a game state that introduced the ghosts.
Right.
It was just kind of like in a way, that's kind of like a cutscene of sorts.
Yeah.
So the circus game doesn't have that. It's doing all of that manually. It's basically checking and saying like, well, if the clown's alive, then let's check some input and let's decide, do I need to move the trampoline, or did the clown hit the trampoline? And so it's kind of it's a little messy.
Yeah. It's kind of hard not to land initially in that messy state, just because of the way the mono game is kind of structured, right? I mean, that game class that kind of triggers everything and has a lot of the stuff that you have in it. And I'm no expert. This is from a week of playing around with the game, with mono and mono game and just kind of learning things. But what you have the initialize, you have the update, you have the draw, and I forget there's a fourth one there that I forget might be closed.
Yeah. Well, so it's load content is one of the four key functions, but
there you go.
Two of them form the game loop, right? Update, draw, update, draw, update, draw. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's very easy. All of a sudden your update method is like loaded with stuff. And when I was going through and just kind of creating stuff in a game, if you want, we can look at it because I have it up and we can just take a walk through. But the idea was some of my update logic, which is your state, was starting to leak into the draw logic. And I was having a Copilot conversation. It's like, well, because logic was in the draw logic, and it was like, well, you need to call this method. I'm like, well, I call it in draw. Let's just make it a property. And it's like, no, you can't do that because it's state and so whatever. Why am I calling it twice, right? So it's like I had to take a step back and kind of reorganize everything and really get it into a place where the update had the stuff in it needed, but it was much smaller, kind of more focused, and it was going and calling off different classes to go do those things. So I can see how that can happen, having fallen into that pit of despair.
Yeah, it's definitely pretty easy, and it's interesting that games. So game dev has been like a hobby. I haven't produced or shipped a game or anything, which I kind of would like to change, but it's been a hobby for a long time. Before we had .NET, before we had the modern graphics cards. And the very first library that I actually went and purchased was and her ears would be burning if she could somehow, was Diana Gruber's FastGraph. Which was a library to help you. Basically, what it was is it was partially coded in assembly, and it was to basically help you have a very fast drawing library, essentially for DOS-based games, and probably without a graphics card. We were early for that. And when you stop and think about what a game really is it's a continuously running simulation that incidentally listens for input, because that might modify the simulation in some way, whether it ends it, like maybe hit enter to start. Well, I'm going to do my thing until I hear someone hit the enter key.
Right.
And in the case of a PC game, escape might be to exit the game. So I'm going to do my thing until I see someone hit escape. And you're actually checking for that every single frame, because at least in theory, if you were to only check it every now and then, you could miss it.
Yeah.
Which so this is not really why it's called this, but it's very similar to the what's known as the fence post problem in game development, of like I might be looking between the fence slats, or I might not be as I move across a fence.
Yeah.
And so if I don't check for that key, then I might not be looking to a place where I could observe it because I missed that observation. And so therefore the user gets frustrated because frames are being updated anywhere from 30 to 60 frames a second, maybe even more. And they get frustrated and they go. And then here's the second problem is it takes a user longer to depress and let go of a key than a frame. It could be several frames. You could hold that key down for seconds and seconds. So now you have to come up with ways to decide, how am I going to listen for a key? And part of what I'm listening for is the state it was also in, so that I don't double, triple, quadruple count it. That could be important for certain aspects, like perhaps a fire button, or perhaps some kind of special ability button that when you or maybe it's maybe you have a limited number of boosts. Well, you don't want the person to hit the boost button and all 5 of them, just because the 5 frames came and went and you just bam, 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 bam. So you've got to have a way to deal with that. At the same time, you may actually say, I want to treat something differently, like steering. Steering, I actually do want to know frame by frame by frame. Are you still steering? Are you not steering?
Right.
And so all these different things can eventually be codified. These are common problems. They're common things that happen to everybody. And that's why game engines are born. Because like you say, well, I want to solve this problem once and I'm going to use it forever and ever. So that's your own personal game engine, or you go use Unity, Unreal, Godot, any of the other engines that are out there, and those, they will already have ways to deal with that. Monogame is, I like to think of it as a programmer's game framework, because it appeals, if you like just sitting down and coding and you're comfortable with C# and .NET, then you don't have to learn anything else to get going. And that's not negative about game engines, but you're partially learning. If you use Unity, you're learning Unity as much as you're learning C#.
Right.
Whereas
and the
with Monogame,
uniqueness of that.
Yeah, with Monogame, yes, you're learning a little bit of Monogame because you got to know how to draw, you got to know how to do certain things, but you are concentrated on, like, this is your program.
Right. And not to say that some of the things you mentioned with like Unity and Unreal and those kind of engines, there are plenty of packages and community contributions that you can use to bring into your mono game. So whether it's physical effect, the physics engine type things, or orbital mechanics type engines, there are those things available that you can bring in and not have to code everything by hand.
Right. There may be a little bit more in the community space for Monogame than I recall. I know that was really like starting to build up when Exadata was popular, as people would kind of build some people even had some off the shelf, like third party, you could buy something and it would be stuff. Essentially it would be, add-ons for Monogame. It's kind of like you were buying some NuGet packages in a way.
Yeah.
Some of this I think predated NuGet though, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. And I will say, because a lot of the stuff I remember going and finding was like, here's this GitHub, repos that you can go and get those packages from, as opposed to being NuGet packages. I will say one of the things that is lacking, if people are interested, especially as it comes to the AI world, is I didn't see anything from a skills perspective, that because I think that's helpful, right? Think about what Aspire is doing with having agent skills inside of the framework, or we looked at the Azure function skill set, because the information out there has changed so much over time. I think having a set of skills in Monogame would certainly be helpful in that, I hate the term, but the vibe coding aspect of what it is that you're, of trying to do development in a Monogame would be certainly helpful. But maybe something to look at.
I agree. There is a GitHub repo out there that's an MCP server to documentation.
Mm-hmm.
but there isn't yet a battery of skills. I did find, I can't remember if I found it in Awesome Copilot. There is a game development skill, but it's definitely focused on web-based,
Yeah.
which is fine. I think that's great. And I feel like
Sure.
there's no reason there couldn't be very similar. In fact, I was kind of thinking of taking inspiration from it and saying, like, let's take what it's saying to do in JavaScript and bring that over to a mono game, and that might be a helpful skill. I think that would be a fun area to tackle. I'm a little unsure right now, like what the skills are, and maybe it might be nice to see what you're struggling with to help, only because like I've kind of done that basic over and over and over that
Mhm.
it's become so easy to dismiss, hey, I should create a skill for this. I'm talking about even
Right.
stuff that I like to do in C# and .NET,
Mhm.
because, you know, you've spent so much time as a developer and so many years just sort of committing to memory or some form of notes, maybe if it's really a little more complicated, how you like to do something,
Right.
that if I could just get that into a skill, you know, um, and that's something we didn't do on the show, but I would like to do is I would like to try and I think a skill is the right place for it, is encapsulate how I want to see C# code written. And I'm trying to figure out how, like, I feel like there's a sweet spot. I think you could overdo it.
Yeah.
But I also would like to say, you know, if there's one thing about C#, it's there is not one way to code in C#. And it's been that way for a while, but it is now more than ever.
Mhm.
And it's because language features are being added quite literally every year now.
Yeah.
Some people may be shaking a fist at that. Other people may be saying, well, finally, I can do this. I personally think the arguments, there's never been more arguments breaking out at work, breaking out among teams, breaking out among organizations. I have seen words like, I'll never use this feature. I've seen that. And,
Right.
you know, we are not paid. I'm quoting Doug Crockford here. We are not paid to use all the features of a language. That's true.
Mhm.
But I do think maybe more than ever, a team has to decide what style of programmer you want to be, because C# is supporting so many of them.
Yeah.
If you want
Yeah.
to be very expression focused, you can, because we have switch expressions and we have pattern matching. And pattern matching just keeps growing with every release, where, you know, you can write very, very concise code about that's essentially would have been a much longer if statement, I guess. Before you go do this thing, check that the object you're dealing with is in such a certain state.
Yeah.
And you'd have written all that code. And for a lot of developers, I think it's very easy to want to own that. But if you really get good with pattern matching, then you don't have to write that boilerplate anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can see, I see what you're saying, because that takes that then is one, and that's kind of what, how can I get there faster, right? So streamlining that aspect of what do I need? Maybe pattern matching something you're not that great at, but that might be a place where the agentic developer or the agentic assistant can kind of help, and because they seem to be very good at finding the pattern matching and bringing up those things. So it's not that we want to leave it to have it always run it, but hey, here's the pattern. Here's the thing I'm trying to solve. Help me figure out what that pattern is, and let's write the code.
Yeah. And so I want to make it clear, this isn't a diss on any specific developer, but I have watched two developers on the same team argue over whether they think it's more clear if the code is maybe a little more old fashioned, in that you come in, maybe the object itself has a method on it that it looks at itself. If this, then then that means operate on myself this way. Or maybe the developer doesn't want to mix data and operations too closely, so there's some other way to do that. And then the other one is like, oh, this is just a pattern. They're like, oh, but that code it's so complex to me. Well, now, is it complex to you because you just don't just not used to it. I could say the same thing about regexes. There are people in this world who, I mean, they got really good at regex. I am not one of those people.
No, same.
They got really good at it. And so to them, when they come across that line of code, they're like, oh yeah, this is, yeah, that's detecting if it's a phone number or something. And you go like, oh, really? Okay, that's great. Because I had no idea.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? The regexes, recognize patterns, and you become good at recognizing the pattern of the regex.
Yeah, and then it even comes back to, you could reduce. There's a concept that, I mean, you can even get a Visual Studio extension for this, and I wouldn't be surprised if we could find one for VS Code. Mm-hmm. And I used to like to have this installed, that every function would get a cyclomatic complexity score.
Oh, wow.
And what I liked about that was, cyclomatic complexity is the concept of how many different ways through your code are there. Mm-hmm. And the score, some people, I want to be clear, some people like to achieve a very, very, very low complexity, to the point, in fact, where perhaps there's only one way through the code. And you'll feel like when there's only one way through code, your brain, thinking about what's going on, doesn't have to say, well, which way am I going here? Which way did the code go? You don't even get surprised when you find out that it didn't do what you thought. And it can be a way to reduce defects, just because you're not going to get surprised. But this very often dovetails into things like being more expression oriented than statement oriented, or even functional style programming. Like, we all know how to write a for loop.
Right.
Okay. But a lot of the things that you can do with a for loop could often be accomplished with LINQ.
Mm-hmm.
And so should I really write a for loop to go through? Should I write the for loop that goes through a collection, stops when it finds a hit, and then returns that hit? Or should I just use where? And I think today in 2026, the vast majority, maybe I'm wrong, the vast majority of C# developers will reach for LINQ, where it wasn't that long ago that people would be like, oh, I hate that. What is that? What is that doing?
Right.
And it's because LINQ was introduced to us as if you go back to the very first, I think it was build, it might have been PDC, but when LINQ was introduced to us, it was introduced to us as a way as a means to work with the database. Yeah. And in fact, the language syntax was probably more highlighted, where it was built into the language. And I feel like that's completely flipped. I think that less people are using what's called query syntax, which is the keywords of C#.
Mm-hmm.
And more are using method syntax like .select, .where.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, right. But that's a flip from when it was introduced. Like, if we go find those old videos, it was like, isn't this great? It's built right into the language. And somehow a mind shift sort of took place. Method syntax was incidentally there, but nobody was talking about it.
Yeah, I kind of remember that, because that was when it came out. I remember that was one of the first talks I gave, was around, hey, you could use that, and you could actually use it in SharePoint to go over a SharePoint list. So I was doing a select and aware and doing a join across those, but I did it with the .select and .where instead of syntax. And I remember Andy asked, like, why did you go that route? Because everybody wants to do it the other way.
Right. It's built into the language. What are we doing? Yeah. And that was the thought process at the time, which I want to say was maybe, I don't know, C# 3 was at the 2008 timeframe, maybe.
That was, for me, that was around 2011, 2010, 2011.
Yeah, I believe. Yeah, I just don't remember exactly when it was.
Yeah. I don't know when it came. It was definitely there at that point. Now, maybe it came out a little earlier.
Yeah, I mean, this goes all the way. I'm pretty sure it's C# 3, which is crazy. It's been around a long time. Yeah. And, it had to be implemented somehow. So method syntax was there, but they were implementing it into the language with what is called query syntax. I wonder if we had C# Jeopardy, if I'm the only one who would have gotten that daily double, right?
Yep.
But I feel sometimes when I look back, I think like how funny how that flipped.
Yeah.
And in fact, link to it's technically was called link to objects and maybe still is, but working with a collection right in memory, that wasn't a thing. Everybody, you were using link to get stuff out of the database, and then you'd go do what you wanted. And I actually think that we're doing that less. Not to say that in EF you wouldn't write a link query in Entity Framework, not saying that, but that people are more today, and maybe even for the past 10 years, are more comfortable with, now that I have this thing in a collection form. I love getting things into IEnumerable form or some collection and just knowing like, well, now I can just operate on it with link.
Yeah.
And that's a style versus maybe the more traditional method of, well, if I want to find out something about it, I'll iterate over it.
Yeah.
You're reinventing something that's already in the where clause, or maybe any, or maybe single, or whatever link method you want to use.
And as you're saying this, part of this comes back that isn't there, it was one of those things that Stephen Tobe and Scott Hanselman went through. And I think it was, they did one, maybe two-parter on link. And it's kind of like says, well, when you write the link query, everybody wants to, under the covers, what is happening, and kind of comparing the two, just like we're verbally doing here, but they actually went through it in a very meaningful detail to really understand what is happening as you make that statement.
Yep. That was, it's one of those videos I kind of have at my fingertips.
Oh, good. Cause I was going to go search for it and I figured, no, I don't even know where to begin right now.
Because I agree with you. I think there are some videos in this world that I think are kind of important. And hold on, I got to get to StreamYard, and I've got to get to presenting and sharing and all that fun stuff. And here it is. Yep, I just got to add it.
Yep.
So this is the two of them right here. Well, I'll get the link to this into the chat. And I agree with you that I believe it ended up being a multi-parter. I'll also get these into the show notes for people that are watching us in the future. I thought this was a very important video in the world where, yes, it seems dry and boring that they're implementing the move next part of an enumerator, right? But it turns out that it's all the foundation to get you to being able to have boilerplate in a framework, or not in a framework, but in a library that you don't even have to ever think about again, the ability to iterate and move through collections. You almost never have to think about it again. What you do is you learn link methods. And I think like they really dive into some stuff that's, and now they're writing tests for it, right?
Yep.
So many people get used to the other names of these functions, like filter. Link calls it where. Most of the rest of the world will call it filter, and link calls select. Oh, I don't know why my brain's escaping me, but select is a very SQL term.
Yes. I mean, so is where, right? And you know, so
right.
I think those things follow the SQL terminology.
Right. And link was criticized a little for that by some folks in the functional community, because they said, we already have names for this. And for whatever reason, probably because it's early morning Monday, those are usually at my fingertips. Like right here, I know exactly what I want to say, and I'm not thinking of them right now. But in any case, yeah, I think that's interesting. You know, with the time that we have, I'd be interested to see if you wanted to show what you were working on in Monogame, because I actually do have a second demo that I'm building up for us on the channel. That this one is the one that I think is it would be my modern tutorial if I were to do it again.
Okay.
I do think the circus game is a good one, but I feel like for me, I would say like that might be game number 2. And then what I'm pretty sure some people who enjoyed that episode want to see is they'd like to see us to move on to modern concepts like 3D, which I would love to do, to make something
Yeah.
very simple where you're just simply walking around a space. You know, building a huge game might be very difficult for us to do on the show, but I'm wondering if we can break down some concepts, just because it is kind of fun. Even though you can use a modern game engine to do all that stuff, there's a whole other side of this. I talked about Unreal and Unity. I would challenge people to consider going a step even further.
Okay.
Consider, for example, the Fortnite Island creator tools, because it's an even higher level of abstraction than the Unreal Engine. Unreal Engine is probably great, but you are now on the hook for figuring out how people are going to play your game, discover your game. You still have these problems but if you'd said, well, I'm going to make a Fortnite Island,
Yeah.
well, you can kind of make the assumption, and almost every gamer has Fortnite.
Right.
So at least I've got a place where I could say to my friend, hey, you want to check out what I'm doing? Just boot up Fortnite and find my island. That's what they're called. And it's like, to me, that's the next level of abstraction of like, how do I even get people to play this?
Yeah, right.
So
The mods and all of those kind of things. Yeah. So this is just, it's not a game. It's not fully functioning. It's not an end-to-end story here. It's just, I wanted to understand how monogame worked. And in my mind, a way of understanding and doing that was creating something simple of, let me zoom in here a little bit. Well, I'm zooming in the wrong one because that's that. 1 second. This one. So I can certainly look at this. Let me blow this up as well. Okay. Is that good? Because I've totally obscured you in the screen. So
no, that's great. In fact, we can move ourselves.
I will let you do that because I like that screen is off screen.
Yeah, like we can just to make sure we're seeing the code here.
Cool. Okay. So really simple. This is just basically, hey, can I get Monogame to draw essentially a planet?
Yep.
And can I get some kind of thing orbiting it? For lack of a better term, I just call it a satellite because that's technically what a satellite is, right? It's orbiting some body without being a moon or something along those lines. Not to get too all astronomical, but so the idea here is I've got, you can see we've got this thing here. We've got where's my zoom it? Oh, well, sorry. So I've got a planet, and the planet has a position. It has some orbital mechanic components like mu, which is a floating value of, I believe, the gravity force of the planet, the radius of how big is the planet before you get to the edge of the planet. All of those are things that are kind of important when you think about one body orbiting another. And then same thing when we think about over here with a satellite, right? Satellite's going to have a position, a velocity, a texture, which is just its appearance in the game essentially. And then there are metrics related to that. So as it's moving, those values are going to change. It's not going to be a straight linear, a straight circle. There's going to be different things impacting on that as it goes around. So those values will change. So I wanted to be able to see those as they went. And that was when I started to get into, the planet's kind of simple. It's just basically draw and then get the gravity acceleration because the values of the planet are important to understand what the gravity impact is. And it's the satellite that winds up calling that right here because it has a reference to the planet and it basically is able to go ahead and get that value. So all of this updating happens and state information happens inside of this update method. And then we get down into drawing things out. We're drawing a couple things out. So I'm drawing not only the sprite, which is the satellite itself as it moves around, but also the metrics, and you'll see those are basically just text in the upper left hand corner of the screen essentially. And then the other thing I did, which I think is kind of interesting, and we'll see this as we go ahead and kick this off, is I created a component. Excuse me. So this is a drawable game component, and what it's doing is it's basically setting a trace line at the end of as the satellite moves around. So I think I had it down to in here, drawing the dots. I see where it was. There was a place in here where basically I said every 10 dots or every 20 dots, something like, or every 20 times that the update thing runs, go ahead and place a dot. So it wasn't every time. So it created this
So
continuous
it's
time
right there
extra
in
spot.
update is my guess, because it looks like it's going through a count
Yeah. Yep.
and it's adding a dot. Well, no, if the dot is dead, okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Nope, good catch. So
Removing.
something else to talk about because you'll see this as it goes through. I
Yeah.
didn't want it to completely.
I
close
kind of
the
can
loop.
guess what's happening though, is it's trying to draw like a trail, but not leave the trail permanent.
Exactly.
So it's
exactly.
adding to the front, removing from the back.
Yep. And in the dot, if we look at the orbital dot itself, it has a position, a lifetime in seconds, and then a max
Yep.
lifetime in seconds. So how far along is it right now? And when we look at the component part, because we are kind of hitting up against the end here, I will just say that it is also taking into account the brightness. So as it gets longer in life, it gets a little dimmer, kind of like we all do as we get older in life.
Cool.
So it starts to fade away. So it actually drops off.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll try and run this and see what happens.
Those kinds of little things can really, those kinds of little effects and thought processes that I think sometimes like creative people are so good at coming up with. They give like this life and motion to a game or animation that you didn't necessarily need it, but then when you have it, it makes all the difference. It makes it feel more modern. That reminds me of a video that I'll try to find while you're talking, because it's another one that I have. There's some that I sort of have like in this perma. I don't have it anywhere. This really should be like a GitHub repo of all-time great videos that I think.
Yes.
Some of them are years old, but when I remember them, I go like, "Oh yeah,
we did do that.
Somebody's done this before," and I remember. So we'll go to it in a second. You were getting that started.
Yeah. Are you able to see it?
No, I don't see anything right now. It might be on a different screen.
Hang on. Because I didn't share my screen. I just shared the whole thing. Okay. 1 second here. Where are we? We're this. There we go. StreamYard. Let's remove that. Let's add this and stop screen and then make it a screen and then make it my entire screen. And it'll be this one. Share. Cool. So what you'll see, it's already kind of in motion. If I put it up on the screen, there you go.
Yeah,
that's better.
Exactly.
And you can see all the values are essentially changing around here. So what's the altitude? The altitude is fluctuating because it doesn't, it has, for the technical term, apogee and perigee, right? When it's the what's farthest away or closest from an orbit perspective, and then what that distance is from the radius here. So distance minus altitude will give you radius essentially from when it's there. But so that's kind of, I can't do anything with it yet. That was kind of the next thing, was how do I go ahead and, take a joystick and give it a little bit more thrust. So maybe we raise the orbit higher, we make the orbit lower, depending on where the thrust is applied. So, and it is using, I'm blanking on the term, but it's actually using orbital mechanic.
Like, again, I'm not an expert in this, but this particular orbit seems to me where like the apogee and perigee might even be the same.
They're very close.
But it would be very possible to, as one part of the orbit is very close to the body and then it goes way out. Because the only reason I know is because I've gotten myself in trouble in Kerbal Space Program that way.
Right.
But I'm certainly no expert on this stuff, or I'd be much better at that game. But no, I think this is cool. And so this is part of a game idea that you've had about, I think I've read, boy, I'm going to be wrong if I introduce it wrong, but it's about creating, it's like a game where you're cleaning up orbit or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the mission, right? So kind of, a combination between Kerbal and Hard Space Scavenger or Shipbreaker, right?
Hard Space Shipbreaker, I think it was called. That's a cool game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So way off in but that was just something just to kind of get the thing, and you can kind of see, you can see by the numbers, altitude is as high as 130 and as low as 128.3 ish, I think. So you can kind of see that run between as you look at an orbit. So fun stuff.
Yeah, so I have this video I'm gonna show real quick.
Cool. Yeah, I'm gonna drop it there.
Let me so this is called Juice It or Lose It. Juice It or Lose It. This video is 12 years old now. It was at a conference. They have this breakout game that starts off very simply. The ball hits the brick and it disappears. That's it. But along the way, they start adding what they call like juice, which is, in fact, right now they're adding particles. So when it's hitting the bricks and hitting the wall, you can see the ball's emitting some particles. And then when it hits and what they're basically saying is they're saying they have shown it's only 15 minutes. And in 15 minutes, they show lots of just little techniques that you can add to your game to give it, like they call it, a little juice. This is just one section. He's just talking about particles. By the end, if I recall correctly, that's not it. That's a little crazy. But by the end, and then they have all these sliders to mess with it. But for example, oh yeah, they gave the paddle some eyes here, and then the eyes are following the ball. And then when it hits the paddle, I think the thing smiles. And like I said, all what they're trying to get to is, make your game more exciting just by adding little touches. My explanation of it is far less exciting than watching it. The crowd really gets into it. They are really animated. You might not be able to tell here, but see the whole board shook there when the ball hit. On every hit of the wall, the whole world is shaking, and you've got streaks and everything. So it's going a little nuts, right? But they go over each of these techniques. And they talk about exactly how to do them. Like, don't just implement what they call like tweening. Don't just implement it one way. You should really implement it to follow a function, because then all you have to do to make it faster, slower, react a different way, bounce a different way, is change the function.
Oh, that's cool.
It becomes geometry, algebra. I'm not quite sure. So there's like a concept a lot of game developers will use that perhaps when the ball hit the brick might bounce up slightly, then come back, and on the way back it would explode. You could define all that with a function.
Okay.
So that way, instead of having to painstakingly change the code to be like, well, I wish the brick bounced a little bit higher up, and I wish that it exploded a second earlier. No. Make it a function. Make it so that you could theoretically grab a graphics calculator and play with the line, and then say, okay, what is the function again? Oh, it's this parabola, or maybe it's not even parabola, this asymptotic function. Okay, great. I'm just gonna plug it into the game. And I think I'm gonna put this in the chat and make sure I include it in the show notes. I think just about everyone who's interested in games should watch this at some point. And even I didn't even spell it right in the chat. Not because you're going to go implement this stuff right away, but these are common game development concepts that you could start bringing in early. And what reminded me of that was the implementation of the orbit, where the orbit's not just being traced, it's being traced. And the dots are both appearing and disappearing. Why? Because otherwise it would just draw the orbit once, and then that would be it. The dots would be there forever. But even better was how they're fading out over time. And that fade out could theoretically be described functionally. When I say that, I mean algebraically. That's probably what I really meant to say. It could be described algebraically, and then you have a generic function that just reads the algebra and says, well, I know how long this dot's been in existence. How bright should it be? Oh, this is how bright it should be. Okay, it's done. So I don't know. It reminded me of this talk, and it's been sitting. I always remember that this is out here.
Yeah. It's a simple fade out the way we have it now, but it certainly could be one of those things where it's like it has a bright burst when it first appears, and then it dies. And that shouldn't change anything that I have there. If you had that all as a function, it could just be swapping in and out of those.
Yeah, the update method just basically passes to it and says, I can tell you how long this dot's been around and the current easing function for it. In fact, maybe when the dot is created, maybe it actually gets a little brighter before it dims.
Yeah, there you go.
And those little things, like instead of you writing all that code, you've implemented this, and then your function basically goes slightly brighter and then asymptotically out, except it wouldn't be asymptotic. It eventually would hit 0, and then that's it. It's gone.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, just something that it made me think of. All right, cool.
Stuff.
I guess we should split back to here because
it
is almost 9. So
yeah,
I think we could do more this week. Like I think I'm open until probably Friday.
Okay. Yeah.
But I would like to dive into something a little bit more, maybe a day on C# features and maybe a day on monogame stuff, because I actually do have a new monogame demo.
Oh, cool.
That I would like to, I just haven't polished up to get onto our GitHub repo so that people can take a look at it too. And it's still 2D, so folks are a little disappointed, but what I thought was interesting about it is I did get some help from Copilot, and it actually uses no assets, but it still uses textures. It's just that the textures are computed in code, which I thought was an interesting strategy when Copilot did it. And then I totally leaned into it and said, I don't necessarily know that I think it's better. I just thought it was interesting. And it kind of gave me this thought process of like, maybe there might be a game where you would dynamically alter textures. I haven't quite thought of the why yet, but it would be something that might be difficult to do with pre-baked assets. But I haven't figured out what that is. I just thinking about it. I don't know what that game looks like, but in any case.
Good to keep that in the toolbox in case you need it. That's all.
Yeah. I didn't know if your shirt was my famous "friends don't let friends use the console" saying.
No, it's the
right YAML. Is that what it is?
Yeah. Yes.
Is it for Aspire?
Yes.
Oh, that's cool. So yeah, I've long made that joke about really online portals. I would say in some respects, I might say the same thing about Foundry, although I don't know that I necessarily. It's not that I don't like that. Before I confuse anybody, it's not that I don't like the Azure portal and Foundry portal. I do very much so, but it's for repeatability's sake. I kind of want to capture what I do in those portals as code if possible, so that way that can be tucked away. And if forbid the worst thing happens and all the resource, or heck, I just want to build the resources again. I don't want to forget that I checked a box or something. So
yeah, no, I'm doing the same here. So new subscription, it's all done with Bicep. So
yeah, that's cool. Yeah, Aspire just had a pretty big release, if I remember correctly, like in the last couple of days, a week or something.
Yeah.
So I'm behind on that. I will admit. I've put it to the side, not because I don't, there's just so much going on. But in any case, it's 9 where we're at, which means it's about time for stand up. And thank you for joining us, whether you're joining us live or watching in the future. And we'll definitely try to get some show titles up that are more focused, so you know what we're doing. And if you're interested in anything we're doing or have some comments, please let us know in the comments below. And we'll be happy to either answer those questions another time or learn from you, because we learn from you just as much, some probably more, frankly. So, Rich, thanks for showing us what you're working on with Monogame. I think that's really exciting, and I'm looking forward to your journey there, because I like to think a lot about how it might just remind me of maybe anything I struggled with in the past. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. And in any case, it looks like Scooter's not here to send us out, which is fine. So I will do it. So for Rich, I'm Chris, and we'll see you all next time on the Dev Talk Show.